On today's show, we will be crossing over with JD Hernandez of Locked on Anaheim Ducks to talk about their newest acquisition in John Klingberg. We'll talk about the implications of Klingberg on the Ducks, talk about the void he leaves with the Stars, and we also talk about the EBUG, the emergency backup goalie, from the final game of the regular season on today's episode of Locked on Stars.
Your Locked on Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked on Stars podcast, the only daily in-season podcast covering your Dallas Stars, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, credentialed member of the Dallas Stars media, coming to you on this Wednesday, August 3rd. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener of the show, thank you for stopping by and for making Locked on Stars your first listen every single day. We just passed the 600 subscriber mark on YouTube. Thank you guys for the continued support and subscriptions. And if you're new here and not subscribed, you can hit that subscribe button for free. You can also subscribe to the show and follow on your favorite podcasting platform. We are free and available no matter where or how you listen. But without much more hesitation, we do have a crossover episode to get into today with JD over at Locked on Anaheim Ducks to talk about John Klingberg. And we also spontaneously got to talk about the EBUG situation concerning the Stars and Ducks in the final regular season game of the 21-22 NHL season. So that was a ton of fun. This is a great chat with JD about mostly John Klingberg and just some other Ducks Stars happenings, but I hope you enjoy it. And here is my talk with JD Hernandez of Locked on Anaheim Ducks.
I'm Jason JD Hernandez, host of Locked on Anaheim Ducks, and to my left, there it is the host of Locked on Stars, Dane Lewis. Dane, how's it going?
I'm good. We were just talking about the heat before this, 89 where you're at and 100 here in Texas. Sounds a little bit better to be where you are, but nonetheless, excited to be talking hockey and talking about one of the better Dallas Stars players of the past decade.
Yeah, let's lead off with that because that was a pretty big signing when it came out on Friday. While I was running, of all things, can't even train without a deal coming out. But the Ducks signed John Klingberg. Now, this was interesting to me. It's a one-year deal worth $7 million. So first, let's talk about just the contract itself, because were you surprised that it was also 1 year?
I was very surprised because I think part of the reason he wasn't coming back to Dallas is he was interested in getting a deal, somewhere around the 6, 7, 8, duration mark, and then wanting to get a really big pay raise because this is probably, he's in this window where this is probably his last opportunity to get, the big paycheck before he starts to get a little bit older. And with that comes, probably a decline of production, a decline in minutes per game. So I was really shocked to see the 1 year deal. $7 million, a pretty good amount of money to make for one year. I believe that's the amount that he'll be making. But yeah, I was really surprised to see the 1 year deal. And I imagine that's going to put a pretty big chip on his shoulder. And you should hopefully expect a pretty productive year from John Klingberg to acquire that said big deal, whether that's from Anaheim or another club.
Right. And the thing that gets to me about this is in that 1 year contract, there is a no trade clause until January 1st, where it's a 10-team no trade clause. I don't think we've seen very many contracts where the no trade turns to a 10-team in the middle of a contract during the season. I mean, I haven't heard many of these. Have you?
No. Yeah. And it's, just one of those things where there's so many small details and deals like this that can get overlooked. And then you kind of take that deep dive. And yeah, I'm right there with you. The no move clause, no trade clause is pretty common in most deals, but to have it limited to a set number of teams is a little bit more, uncommon. But then especially in the, that middle of the season, January's, almost right before the All-Star break, that is kind of an odd, add to the contract for sure.
Also, before one other thing around the All-Star break, what do we think that is? Some kind of deadline, right?
Yeah, some kind of deadline. Nothing too big.
Yeah, just something, which has spawned the conversation from Anaheim fans and hockey fans all around. What's going to happen with him in the middle of the season? Is he the biggest trade chip all of a sudden, even though the season hasn't started yet?
I mean, depending on his production, I think he certainly could be. I mean, even this past year, he was one of the more talked about defensemen, especially just with how limited the market would be for free agents this offseason, and so on and so forth. But I think with the Stars having a pretty serious, run for the playoffs, and then of course Miro Heiskanen got mononucleosis right before the trade deadline. I think that inclined the team to hold on to Klingberg a little bit longer.
Yeah. So, I mean, the 7 million would get maybe 6 million if it was a longer term deal. And when you talk about the Ducks having all this money, and I've been saying this in the chat, spend the money. You have 25, 26 million to spend, and they finally reached the cap floor with this deal. So the Ducks did accomplish something here. I still don't know if they're done yet, but what kind of production can Klingberg bring to this young Ducks team?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that he can bring, you mentioned the Ducks being a young team, is he can come in and be a guy that can just be a nice veteran presence in the locker room. That's something he's been in Dallas for the past several seasons. When you talk about the leadership on that team of Tyler Seguin, Jamie Benn, John Klingberg could easily go up right there next to those guys as far as, a guy who can, play well on the ice, but also conduct himself professionally off the ice and, always be, easygoing with the media and never really running into much trouble off the ice, never involved in any scandals, things like that. So he's a great guy to have in the organization just as far as culture. And I think that that's just massive across the NHL. Anytime you can bring in a guy that is a true professional, both on and off the ice, that's always a positive. But as far as the on ice production, he's one of the better offensive defensemen in this league, and certainly was that for the Stars, really, ever since he got drafted. He's second in just about every all-time defensive category for the Stars, only behind Sergei Zubov, who probably the best defenseman in franchise history, just had his number retired this past season. Yep. Klingberg, a guy that can get it done on both ends. He can play the defensive side pretty well, even though he is starting to get up there in age. He'll turn 30 later this month on August 14th, but the offense is still certainly there. And I think, if you're a Ducks fan looking at the numbers for Klingberg in the past few seasons, maybe you see a little bit of a dip in goals and assists that could be attributed to, the coaching system and the coaching regime, if you will, of Rick Bowness over the past few years. I mean, while, he was a really good defensive-minded coach, I think we saw the offense, kind of be taken away from some of the defensemen on the team, including Miro Heiskanen, who, isn't known for his offensive prowess, but definitely has the ability. Even his numbers were a little bit lower under Bowness. So I think under a new system and with the different coaching staff and with the right coaching staff, Klingberg can be utilized on both sides of the ice and can really be that 200-foot player that can hopefully, help mentor this next generation of Anaheim Ducks players to be excellent on the ice, but also, be that good example off the ice as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but didn't we see Klingberg in the power play unit a lot last season?
We did.
Yeah.
Which, for better or for worse, the Stars power play great before the All-Star break and was not a factor in games afterwards. It just disappeared. It was like a magic trick. A bad one.
This sounds familiar to Ducks fans because the Ducks had the same thing. They were top 5 in power play the first half of the season before the All-Star break, and then after that they were complete, bull funky, pretty much. It was bad. And part of that can be attributed to coaching, which is also a big question mark for the Ducks because Dallas Eakins is back for another season. But at least the assistant coaches for the Ducks right now are accustomed to being good power play guys. And one of those guys I mentioned in past podcasts of myself, someone they stole from the Ontario Reign, Mike Stuthers, he's very good at the power play. And also we've seen Johnson, who was an assistant coach for the Ontario Reign, who, by the way, had the best power play in the American Hockey League. Maybe that'll translate to the NHL level as well. So at least for power play numbers, I have more faith in Klingberg. Not that I didn't have faith in current Ducks right now, but I remember Klingberg part of last season where he just quarterbacked amongst the best in the entire league.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's been for this team over the past several seasons. Like I said, one of the probably the second best defenseman in franchise history, and that's a huge part of it. Is he can hold his own on the offensive end, and whether it's shooting from the blue line and the puck going in on its own, or just finding the right guy that's in front of the net for a tip in or a deflection, he's just incredibly smart at the blue line. I mean, sometimes he not always perfect, and sometimes mistakes are made, but overall, he's a guy that if he's on your power play unit, that you've got a pretty decent chance to be successful.
I think my biggest thing with him is he's very calm, cool, and collected on the blue line, especially on the power play, where he won't bobble too many pucks, right?
Right.
He'll keep control. He'll bring the puck in. I remember the zone entries for Klingberg; those numbers are pretty good for him overall. So I think in that aspect, it would be a big plus for the Anaheim Ducks, and maybe they can get back to that top 5 in the power play this year, in the first half at least.
Yeah, it's all sometimes starting out well is a good for the fan base. I know even last year the Ducks were kind of an underdog, slept on team in the first half of the season that took a lot of people by surprise with a lot of the young talent that you have there. So I think bringing in a guy like John Klingberg could go a long way, and maybe extending that a little bit farther than just the first handful of months of the season. And we'll kind of have to see what happens with him. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all your favorite sports events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for your sports wagering information. From live betting, esports scores, and podcasts, they have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action happening around the sports world. BetOnline is the official online sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. BetOnline.net is where the game starts.
All right, speaking of being responsible, I talked about Klingberg being responsible on the blue line. Segue back. The reason I like Klingberg on this Ducks team is he could mix and match with many different Ducks players. I see him being on that line with Cam Fowler. You have that perfect left-right matchup. And you also have good, I guess, longevity there. The only concern, as you've mentioned, the defensive game isn't quite there compared to other defensemen. Same with Cam Fowler. So this could turn into an offensive, juggernaut of a first line in defense. That's about it.
Yeah, which, sometimes the best defense is just an unstoppable offense. I think, even the Avalanche, as good of defensive players as they have, I mean, that was a team that was just tough to beat because of the amount of goals and the volume of goals they could score. You look at guys like Cale Makar, which Klingberg nowhere near the talent level of Cale Makar, but sometimes the best defense is no defense, and just a plethora of goal scoring.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, this Ducks team will be fun. We might have some 7-6 games. So, hey, when the Ducks go down to Texas, we might see a 8-5 match, and you'd be all for that.
Oh yeah, because anytime the Stars can score more than 2 goals in a game, that even if it's a loss, I mean, it's a step in the right direction. Just with sometimes how without offense the team can be, and hopefully with a new coaching staff and a few added players in free agency, we can see a little bit of an uptick in offensive numbers for the Stars.
Yeah. Don't worry, the Ducks will have a real goalie next time the Ducks and Stars face each other.
I literally thought of that as I was hitting recording. I was like, oh, we never got to talk about the EBUG because that was the last game of the season, and the playoffs started, and chaos with the playoffs. Yeah, we never got to talk about the EBUG in Dallas, the final game of the season.
Yeah, we never got to talk. I mean, we could talk about that right now, just because even though it's a few months removed from that, I mean, yeah, I was gone for a couple of weeks there, but why don't we talk about that game just for a hot minute? Because
no, let's do it.
Because it was weird. I still cannot believe that Hodges was goaltending there. Could you? Tom Hodges coming in?
Yeah, and it was so bizarre because I wasn't actually even able to watch the game on TV. I was listening on the radio because I was traveling and had gone away from the game for a second, then came back, and they kept referring to this Hodges guy, and I was like, I don't know who that is. And then I eventually found out, EBUG situation, that he was literally like in the stands eating a hot dog. I'm pretty sure when they came up and said, "Hey, you got to suit up," and then I look on social media and I see the Ducks goalie wearing a Stars helmet, and pretty sure he had green or black or white and green pads on. Just such a bizarre situation for the end of the season, but he did pretty well, all things considered. I mean, that's a tough situation to be put into, and he did about as well as he could have.
Yeah, I mean, he did allow the one goal, but he did as well as anybody. I did love the applause that he got after the game from the Stars fans. Yeah. And I love that he got the 3rd star of the game, by the way.
Yeah, it's just a unique story that now he has that to, tell for the rest of his life. I mean, that's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And if I'm not mistaken, that one goal was to Jason Robertson, so no shame there. I mean, he was a 40-goal scorer, so he was getting pucks past some of the best in the league. So, that's a tough guy to defend against when you're in the crease, especially when you woke up that morning not knowing you would be going up against a 40-goal scorer in Jason Robertson.
Yeah, I mean, that's an all-star caliber player right there. It's going to be hard to beat any all-star caliber player. I mean, the next line of goalies, now you put Hodges on that list right there with David Ayers of the Hurricanes. And who am I missing here? There's another name that I'm forgetting about. Scott Foster for the Blackhawks. I knew I'd remember that. So he now joins that list of EBUGs that have come in. And, I do love the little British accent he had there. I just love Tom Hodges so much. I wish the best for him.
Yeah, I do too. Such a cool story, and like just to cap off the regular season that way. I mean, that's a great storyline.
Yeah, I think the other weird part of the storyline is that he doesn't have 100% vision in his, I want to say his left eye. So he doesn't have exactly 20/20 vision. And there he is, wearing number 68. No name on the back, but there he was saving goals. That was also weird too. I can't remember the last time that a player played an NHL game with no nameplate on the back. That was really bizarre to see.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess in a situation like that, I mean, you just don't have time to be prepared for that. Because, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the EBUG is provided by the home team, and Anaheim was the road team in that game. So it's not like they could just stitch together a Hodges nameplate for the back of the Ducks jersey he had on.
Yeah, maybe they ran out of one letter or something.
Yeah, they had all the letters except like the D in the middle, or the E, some random letter. And
no, they got plenty of E's. It's the D or the G at some point. Like, yeah. Oh man, don't quite have it. But that was fun times. So let's talk about, to wrap up, the Klingberg loss and the signing, what it means for both teams. How big of a loss is it for the Stars?
It's a pretty big loss, but it's one that I think Stars fans have come to terms with, just with how long this has been rumored, and it seemed inevitable even after the trade deadline that he was probably going to walk, and we would lose him for nothing, just because this guy has been such a huge piece of this franchise ever since he got drafted in 2010. And before we recorded today, I was looking back at our 2010 draft, only 5 picks, and these are the picks in order. Jack Campbell, who never really played for the Stars. I think he had one game, recorded the loss in that game, but now he's the newest goalie at Edmonton. Patrick Nemeth, the second pick in the draft for the Stars. I think he's now with the Coyotes. Scored 2 goals last season with the Rangers, and one of them, ironically, against the Dallas Stars. But a defenseman that probably a lot of people, they were expecting him to be the quote unquote premier defenseman from this draft class, and then he never really panned out in Dallas, and is still just kind of been a journeyman in the NHL. And then 2 other guys, Alexander Gupta, I believe is how you say his name, and Alex Thoreau. I might be mispronouncing that, but 2 guys that never even saw the NHL.
I remember both of them.
Yeah, never made it to the NHL. The second guy never even made it to the AHL. I don't even. He ended up actually retiring early due to a hip injury at age 20. So I mean, just an unfortunate ending to the career there. But Klingberg was the last pick in that draft. I believe 131st overall, and he's panned out to be one of the best players in recent franchise memory. And like I said earlier, one of the best defensemen in franchise history, certainly. And he's an incredibly clutch player in the playoffs, especially. I think what most people will remember him for is the game-winning goal in Game 6 against Nashville in 2019, and just a guy that's very easy to root for. And I know a lot of people are pretty upset that he's gone, but also understand that, we just didn't have the money to bring him back for what he wanted if we wanted to hold on to Jake Ottinger and Jason Robertson and Rope Hintz, who's going to be a free agent at the end of next season. So it's one of those, this is a business, as the cliche goes in this world. And John Klingberg wanted to get what he thought he deserved pay-wise. And, $7 million this season is certainly a good payment amount. But you better believe that he will, work as hard as he can to earn the next paycheck, whatever that looks like for him after this season.
Yeah, it feels like a show-me contract for sure. And by the way, love those fifth-round picks. I mean, the Ducks now have two of them. Troy Terry, also a fifth-round pick, and John Klingberg, by the way. So,
yeah.
Always good to get those deep picks down the line. And something that you mentioned, I mean, it's only 1 year, and to me, this really is a show-me-what-you've-got deal. And because it's a 1 year deal, I think he's going to go balls out for the first 4 or 5 months. And whatever happens first half of the season, I feel like it's still a win-win for the Ducks. Here's why. If the Ducks are terrible, that could happen. They could trade him, and he could get a first-round pick at least back, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. At least a first, maybe a second as well, maybe a prospect. I mean, that would be a huge rental to get. But if the Ducks have an amazing season, he might want to stick around. I personally would rather see him stick around because, to your point, he's the second best defenseman in Dallas Stars. And who's to say that he cannot replicate that with Anaheim in hockey, right?
Yeah, that's the great part of the game. You never know when, change of scenery is the, really what gets guys going. I mean, we saw it with Nazem Kadri this past season. He'd been a decent player and, gets to Colorado and then just has the season of his life. And now he's, making us all hold our breath of where he's going to sign. So
the Ducks have money. They still have about not 20 million, but they have a lot of cap space. I'm just saying they have the space. Why not go after Kadri for a year? He's not going to get a year. Not happening.
Man, if it did though, that definitely raises the stock behind the Anaheim Ducks for this season, I think.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do it though because they still have to re-sign guys the following year, and who knows about the coach then? Who knows which players are going to stick around? How much Zegras is going to want? I think he's going to want a bit of money.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And if he follows up his rookie campaign, he'll likely be deserving of said money.
Yep, and he'll join other rookies there. Mason McTavish will be a rookie this season. There's one name that I have not mentioned, and I feel like it'd be slanderous if I didn't mention this or didn't talk about this. There's a young defenseman for the Ducks that I think could learn a lot from Klingberg, and that's Jamie Drysdale. Is another one of those guys that can offensive side, is possible defensively, does have a little bit of shorthanded. I mean, he's not the best defensive defenseman, but good skating, good overall play, great offensive player. And I think if there's one guy that I hope Klingberg takes under his wild wing, that would be Jamie Drysdale. I mean, he's still only 20. He's only 20 years old, folks. He can't even drink in this country yet. And he's already doing a lot of stuff. So I say to everyone, have patience with Drysdale. Defensemen typically take a little bit longer to develop anyway. And I think Drysdale could be the guy that could, I guess, maybe mold himself a little bit to Klingberg's game, learn a little bit from him. That's what I'm hoping for. So that's why I really hope Klingberg sticks around, is so JD can have someone to learn from at that position.
Absolutely. That sounds like, right up Klingberg's alley to be the good teammate that he's been in Dallas, that's going to translate to Anaheim very well. And yeah, Drysdale's certainly a guy that will likely benefit from, his mentorship, if you will. And I know there's plenty of guys on this Stars roster that probably, relate to that. Thomas Harley is a guy that was finally starting to get some pretty consistent NHL minutes, and he'll probably have to take on a bigger role this season with his absence, as well as Colin Miller, who is a free agent from Buffalo that we got. Never really got to spend time with Klingberg, but I mean, you just talk about big shoes to fill or big skates to fill, I mean, that is certainly the case. Miro Heiskanen, obviously the future here in Dallas as far as defenseman, but there's got to be that second guy that can step in and be, the next great leader of this defensive core. And Ryan Suter, great veteran presence, not as talented as John Klingberg
No.
at his age, because he is definitely at the back end of his career. Klingberg probably still has 7 or 8 pretty good years ahead of them if he can stay healthy, which he's done a really good job of in his career. That's another nice thing about Klingberg is if he's down, it's for a few games, but then he's typically right back in the thick of things.
And to your point, I guess one final thing to mention is conversely, Jamie Drysdale won't have to have the pressure of being on the first line defensive. Now he can kind of relax a little bit, go to that second line, and not have to be the guy at the time, 19 years old. He was supposed to be like the guy at 19. You know how much pressure that is? There's throwing to the Wolves, and there's what the Ducks did to young Drysdale at 19 years old. Poor kid. I mean, I love JD. Don't put all the pressure on him. Let him get to that second line. He'll probably flourish a lot there. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, that certainly seems like like any advantage that Drysdale can gain from Klingberg coming, it seems like he will likely get. Whether that is the pressure being taken off of him, the mentorship, the teaching, it just seems like a very nice addition to that locker room for the Ducks and John Klingberg. And I'm sad to see him go, but at least he didn't go to a Central Division team. I find it a little bit easier to still support Stars players when they don't play for division rivals, and Klingberg will fit that. And I'm sure that whenever he's back in Dallas, I would hope and expect the Stars faithful to I imagine there will be some sort of tribute video that gets played, and if Stars fans aren't appreciative and happy to see him back, I'll be pretty disappointed. But I, for one, will be happy to see him when he comes back to Dallas. But again, I don't expect any negative criticism against Klingberg, just given everything he's done for this franchise.
The Stars fans had better applaud him hard. They'd better.
They typically are pretty kind when it comes to former players, and then just in general. I mean, obviously, we talked about the Hodges situation. They're a pretty easy crowd to, once you've done something right or you've done, something to gain their favor, they typically will show their appreciation. So I expect it, and I'm sure a lot of people will be excited to see him back in Texas whenever the Ducks come to town.
Yep. All right. So folks can find me on Twitter, by the way, at StimpyJD, as you can see, comme ça. And Dane, where can they find your information?
Yeah, they can find me just at Dane 2_ and my last name Lewis, and then our show just a simple at Locked On Stars. So a really quick and simple search for any Stars updates as far as the team or the show.
Awesome. And let's do this again at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever the Ducks and Stars get together, we'll definitely have to cross over, because I'm sure there will be a lot to talk about as far as how Klingberg's doing, and with the NHL, there's always something to talk about in the season.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it was fun.
Yes, sir.